Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next session. My name is Lode Dewulf, and we have a wonderful panel to discuss a topic that is even more wonderful and especially very, very important: coaching in medical affairs. I'm coming to you as somebody who's worked almost 30 years in medical affairs, and I can tell you, coaching in medical affairs would have been an extremely short session during most of my career because there basically was none unless you were lucky with your direct boss. So it's great that we can cover this with excellent panelists, and they all come with their complementary background. And we will divide our time in three parts, actually four. A very quick introduction. Then we'll talk about the need of coaching. Then we'll talk about the hurdles, why coaching has not happened or is not happening as it should yet. And of course, we want to spend most time on solutions, of which there's also one particular that we will give some special attention. With me today, and I'm going to start ladies first, I have Emma Booth. She has been a writer for many years, so she really masters language, and a blogger. So if you want to join her blog, I'm sure they'll give her a big smile. And she's now in charge of medical affairs and strategy and capabilities. And of course, capabilities is what we're talking about. Emma, you want to add a quick thing to that? Something that the audience doesn't know about you?
No, I change the color of my hair very often, so you'll see there's never consistency between any of my profile pictures.
Fantastic. Second, we have Michelle. Michelle actually comes from where the real coaching happens in clinical care, which because she worked as a nurse, as a nurse, and as we all know, when we are patients, usually the nurses coach us a little bit better than the doctors do, and I can say it because I have been trained as a doctor. From nursing, she moved into pharma, a lot of experience in drug safety, medical writing, and her passion is now in helping medical affairs and especially medical information, where there's direct contact with different customers, to do well, and she has also very good experience in coaching. And then, as a surprise, out of a box, totally out of pharma, maybe has been a patient but never worked in pharma, we have Marcus. Marcus probably is winning the prize for the longest connection because he's calling in from Sydney. So I don't know what time it is for you, Marcus, but you look awfully awake. He's been on the acting side as a director for many pieces, and from that he became a presentation coach, right? And as a presentation coach, he worked with very big celebrities and also with normal people like us, and he learned a lot about coaching. And from that came a solution on which I'm sure he will spend a few words later. And just to keep the suspense no longer, it's called 60 seconds. So with that little introduction, let's talk about the need. So Emma and Michelle, and I'll ask Marcus later, you both have spent at least part of your career in medical affairs. Tell us about the coaching you got and or didn't get, and what you consider as the biggest needs. Who goes first?
Michelle?
Okay. So for myself personally, it's been very little to sporadic coaching, which is it's a pity. And I think it's also what's driven me to be so ambitious about coaching myself, especially my team, and helping others cross-functionally within medical affairs. So partnering to offer opportunities for coaching. And I think what I always see as the need that we have is that we really manage very busy day-to-day schedules. We have very task-oriented and time-oriented and patient customer focused deliverables every single day. So what ends up happening is there's not really consistency in coaching. I think it's, a lack of dedication sometimes and time. And I think as well, it takes time to work with the team members as a manager or amongst the teams, but as well to partner across the business and allow these opportunities cross-functionally.
Great, thank you. Michelle, thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear that you didn't get much. Emma, were you more lucky?
I think yes, in many ways, but I think it's less formally acknowledged and less really. I think for field roles, we do have a very formal appreciation and expectation that the leaders are actually delivering that coaching. I think in other traditional roles within medical affairs, it's not necessarily the same, and we maybe don't sort of acknowledge it as such, but I think it does come through, and I think it's one of, as Michelle's already stated, it's one of the most important things you can do as a leader is take that on, and it's often also one of the hardest things to do as a leader, because you often are good at your job, you get promoted, and then you're no longer really focusing on the job that you were good at, but you're also focusing on suddenly managing and trying to develop these people. So it's I think part and parcel of every role within medical affairs now, and one we need to put more emphasis upon.
Wonderful, thank you. So it's pretty similar. So that brings us to the resident expert. Marcus, we haven't even defined coaching yet, but we clearly have already experiences that we didn't get much of it. As our expert, could you perhaps, before saying a little bit about what you see as the need, could you tell us how does the field that is specialized, what is actually coaching? And what's the difference with training? And is it only for leaders? So we could talk an hour about that.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question, and I think probably in the last sort of 5 years or so, the coaching has sort of developed this kind of aura around it, where everybody's a little bit sort of unwilling to actually sort of stand up and go, I think this is what coaching is. I came from a teaching background, which was very sort of one way, and training sort of one way like that. I think coaching is the ability to have a kind of peer-to-peer interaction where you try to draw a response from and an improvement from the person that you're working with through a process of questioning, through a process of deduction, and I think most importantly, sort of crystallization. I've found that, the more coaching that I've done, actually the more listening that I do now, and the less input that I have to really focus on, 2 or 3 things where a person could potentially improve, as opposed to trying to throw the book at them, so to speak.
So the key is that one-to-one real-time interaction, the listening. And so from the outside in, how do you see the need of coaching in medical affairs?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. I mean, my experience with Pharma has been about 15 years, more on the commercial side than the medical side. But often talking to people on the commercial side, there's been a consistent refrain of, they could really do with this in medical, and I was sort of like, do with what, and sort of, I guess the key thing for me is I've always coached people at quite a high level with a reasonably or a very strong technical knowledge. And my coaching is all around communication skills. So how do you take that very technical knowledge that you have and make it accessible to a wider audience, or even to an audience that knows a lot of the same things that you do? How can you make the communication that you deliver stickier and more engaging for them?
All right. I can see that. Yep. And from the inside out, is that something, Emma and Michelle, that you would agree is the biggest coaching need, that is to transfer from science to actually understanding? Well, let's go Emma first, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And in its truest and traditional form, that's really how we're using coaching, very much with the MSLs, in helping them to understand what they are from the science. They understand and are the experts in the science, but how to deliver that as a story that's also engaging and with a purpose is often where we're focusing on coaching. I think, though, beyond it's truly something that we can all benefit from, and I know that Michelle has definite sort of thoughts on this with her experience.
So Michelle, from a MedInfo perspective, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think what's interesting is MedInfo has 2 kind of customers to pivot when they have to manage like their capabilities. One is to the customer directly, patient, caregivers, HCPs. So there's a lot of work you have to do, I think, in the coaching in that space. And that's quite technical in many situations. And it may actually translate into writing or how you actually speak with them. But the other side, and it's something I've always said I'm kind of a bit of a warrior on, is showing the value of MedInfo. It's something where the underdog's very underestimated, but it's a very large talent pool and people that are really customer facing. So what I have had to really work on with my team members and developing managers and future leaders is how do you take all the really technical things we do that are invisible oftentimes and be able to communicate that value. And that really is something that's a pivot that people are not used to, because it's like, we're good at what we do. It's obvious, look at our data. We feel often quite comfortable with that. But the reality of it is you have to really help people understand the value of what you do and how it impacts the wider business. And most importantly, how it impacts our customers. So this is also something I have to spend a lot of time coaching and even myself developing. So I think we have, multiple ways that we have for coaching in MedInfo especially.
I can tell you, I will admit, Color, I've been a big proponent for medical information the whole time. I always say that it's the only people in the company who get customers who want to talk to them.
Exactly.
Everybody else, it's the other way around. We're chasing the customer.
Yeah.
We're not valuing that enough. In addition, it's the only department that gets a true mix between lay people, patients, nurses, pharmacists, doctors. MSLs are much more at a different level. And I think that's why the cross-fertilization that you both and Michelle have talked, and that comes together, as Marcus said, in that common need for better communication. We have clearly established the need for that. So then the question is, Jesus, why hasn't it happened? If it's that obvious, Michelle, let's start from the inside. Or Emma, in your company, you're responsible for capabilities, medical affairs, ex-US, huge responsibility. I'm sure in your brief, coaching must have been top number one, no? Or are there any hurdles? Can you talk us about the hurdles?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a number one, and I think we've all agreed in previous conversations together, it should be part of the culture, and it needs to become part of the culture within the organizations. The hurdles, I think, are time. People are very often not dedicated to their role, so they are doing multiple roles, and if they turn it into too much of a thing, then it actually becomes more difficult to implement. So I think in many cases, less is more, in definitely having them do more of the talking. But in the case of coaching, more is more. So if you can put it into, a weekly touch point with your team, that you are, one-to-one having the discussion and just asking, as Marcus said, simple questions that are really saying, what are your real priorities this week? And then really, what can I help you, or how can I help you with that? And really encouraging them to do the talking. And in the end, it's their experience and their take on everything that will help them to advance further than what your perspective might be. So I do feel that kind of time, and when we try and make it into this big organizational commitment and structure it such, it sometimes becomes, almost unimaginable as how we can do it. But if you kind of break it down and just have it in your weekly kind of catch up, then I think it can become more readily adopted. And then, I think it's just there are really many hurdles. Is, do you have to track this? Do you need this? But I think, again, it's like, it's better to just start, and then, as an organization, put your stamp on the ground and say, we want this to be a priority. And then hopefully you can find the other things that will support you along the way. But many different sort of strategies, etc., exist.
All right, that's clear. Michelle?
Yeah, I only echo what Emma says. And I think one of the things, this is moving a little bit towards solutions, but as a manager, you have to be committed to this yourself. And what that really looks like tangibly. And I remember when HR, and I talked to HR about adding this to my objectives, to say, I have a goal and my objective is to actually develop and coach my teams. With smart, I actually had a smart objective around this, to say, what does good look like when it comes to saying I've actually made a concerted effort to support my teams in coaching and to effectively give them the tools to succeed in their development goals, but as well the impact to our wider business. So I think it's getting the hurdles really are is you have to really commit to this. And as I said, the commitment is definitely one of the biggest ones. And I think as well the time, but you have to make the time and you have to set the commitment to yourself as a manager.
Right, great. So commitment as a core issue there. Nobody mentioned budget as an issue, which will people make Marcus and others extremely happy. But honestly, my 30 years, it's more than that. Michelle, culture. Our culture would not have tolerated us spending time on coaching, whether we wanted to commit or not. I mean, that's, you want to say something about culture? I mean, Emma's clearly changing that, but.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think that managers that really have this culture in their organization, we find a way. I mean, it costs nothing to create mentorships. It costs nothing to, help support things like massive online courses and helping people with like technical skills. It's costs nothing to help your people build their networks. So from my opinion, there's a lot of low cost ways to do it. If you use budget as an excuse, that's a pity, because I think there's a lot of creative ways many of us have found to get around that. But to your point, on a wider culture outside your organization, I've found many times, and probably Emma as well, we've had to help support and build that culture within Med Affairs so that other partners would partner with us. And it has a twofold effect. One is it gives you partnership and mentorship opportunities, but most importantly, increases your team's visibility. So I think it's quite important.
Got it. But at the same time, I'm being devil's advocate. We used to say in medical affairs, as Emma said before, it's only for leaders. Now I'm going to Marcus, because Marcus has developed something that's for everybody in medical affairs. And actually, the four things that I noted down that both of you said, Emma and Michelle, is it has to be one-on-one. That was the beginning. It has to be regular, ongoing. You need manager commitment and time commitment. So manager and time. And all of those somewhat in the solution that Marcus has come up. So Marcus, when you developed this, did you see differences between sales reps and medical affairs? Can you comment a little bit on that, or what were the hurdles that you came?
No, I think the similarities and the parallels are stronger than the differences. I mean, I think everybody wants to be more memorable. Everybody wants to say something that captures their audience's attention. I think sometimes in medical affairs, I've sort of caught a bit of a sense that there's a certain piety around the science being good enough as it is. Well, why not just send somebody a paper? Why would you bother meeting them in person? You'd meet them in person because you want to convey your passion, your enthusiasm, your insight, all that stuff that comes from soft skills and from practice. And really the whole point of 60 seconds for me was born out of a frustration that I had of the people that I coached, that they couldn't practice effectively and efficiently in between the face-to-face sessions that we had. So I just wanted to maintain learning momentum throughout a consult with the person that I was coaching. And in order to do that, I wanted to have these little touch points in between. And that's why 60 seconds was created. And really, it's been used across professional services with lawyers. It's been used with politicians. It's been used with sports people, a whole lot of different people. But obviously very relevant to pharma, because it's how do we take really technical information and make it have that kind of cut through that good communication has as its trademark.
Great. So we've wonderfully moved into the solutions part, and clearly 60 seconds. By the way, why 60 seconds? What's the name of 60 seconds?
Well, I think my view is if you talk for longer than 60 seconds, then you've probably spoken too long. I've got a background in media and in TV. I was interested in the concept of advertisements and, lasting a certain period of time. But for me, it's about small amounts done well. And I don't think you can practice a skill around communication, let's say being authoritative in execution, if you speak for longer than really, I believe, 30 seconds, So that's kind of the idea, that you practice content and you practice those soft skills, as we call them.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So what you added here is that it's not just one-to-one coaching, but you also need to find a way to use the time in between the coaching moments. And all of us online who have coached anybody in our career, it's true, right? Once a month is not enough. And Emma said you need this regularity. And I also like what I think it was Emma or Michelle said, put it in the objectives of the manager. Michelle, you said that. Because unless it's there, it's not going to happen. It's not going to get recognized, not going to get rewarded. Beyond that, now we're seeking solutions. Michelle, what can we bring from medical information across to the MSLs as skills, a skill set, and particularly coached skill set?
Yeah, I think in MedInfo, as I said, we very much are technical experts. And I think one of the things we have is the voice, really truly the voice of the customer.
Okay.
So in that scenario, I think from a coaching perspective, we can and help others understand, really what their experience is with our products. Coaching perspective, what that really means is we're already kind of doing that. We kind of nudge people with our data to say, hey, commercial, hey, medical, we're seeing these trends. What are we going to do to address that? If you have a good communication kind of, platform between the organizations. And so from a coaching perspective, again, it comes down to giving the team members, I like the point from Marcus that 1 minute elevator speech, right? That you can articulate very quickly what that data means. And you have to coach people to that. Not everyone in medical information is necessarily able to do that. So I think that's one area. But the other is understanding how to adjust and pivot your message to who you're talking to, whether it's a commercial team member or a medical team member, because everyone has different objectives and different ways that they view your data or the information you're sharing. So I think those are kind of because I think no one doubts we're always the experts in the data, and we're usually quite expert as well in communicating with the customer. But I think the communication side and a lot of the coaching is then how do you present this information and articulate this well? And you have to spend a lot of time, I think, helping to give your team members that strength to do that.
Okay, thank you. So Emma, actually, how do you do what Michelle said? Because ex-US capabilities, what diversity between countries, as Michelle said, between different functions within medical affairs. How do you even start doing this?
I think empowering people and giving them the opportunity. There are many people that are, good in their role and want to have this as an opportunity for a growth or, an interim step before taking on formal management. So I think, finding a way to have a network. I really liked as well what we've discussed in that there are many transferable skills that are beyond medical affairs, and it's also important to kind of enable that connection. So, for example, looking at manufacturing to be able to coach, someone in medical affairs on execution and things like this. So looking at those different elements, and again, it's building the networks of your team, but it's also, allowing people with that true kind of experience to give that knowledge to somebody else rather than trying to force it via another route. So I think, yes, enabling that as a network and fully embracing it as a culture within your company and really starting to deliver on it. And as, Michelle said, it can, yes, if you have, the budget, you can do great things, but you can make a start with, just the will and the desire to make a difference.
Right. Yeah. So Marcus, do you agree? Do we have everything we need? Is it just we need to buy this app, empower everybody to do it, and happily we walk away and we will be all good? Is that it, or what other tips can you give us?
Well, look, I think I like the idea that Roger Federer had a coach. If it's good enough for Roger Federer to have a coach, then I think it's good enough for anyone. And I think sometimes, I know in Australia this is the case. I think it might be a cultural thing sometimes, but when you coach certain groups of people, they can say, oh, I don't need a coach, or, I don't need, I'm okay the way that I am. So I think it needs to be positioned as, we all, can do with help with different things. And it's not a fault to need coaching. It's actually, it's an investment in you, and with it, you can grow into a more effective professional, which will allow you access to, future higher opportunities in your professional career. I think as long as we work out what's in it for each person in the kind of food chain and position it properly and create a nice atmosphere, and then have processes, and then most importantly, execute on those processes, because that's where I see companies always fall down. They like the idea, they deploy something, but then it's the sustenance, it's the follow-up, it's the regularity, and it's the commitment to it over time that is what delivers the results.
Yeah, which brings us to the topic everybody's avoided so far, KPIs. Michelle and Emma, what are your coaching KPIs in your medical affairs organization?
I mean, I'm as bold as to have even things like retention tied to it, staff retention. I have things like, actual number of people that progress to future roles, whether it's like from the, a manager to senior manager, et cetera. And also other KPIs really around, how many people have engaged in coaching or other cross-functional projects, and actually how they've accomplished in those mentorship or coaching projects. So I think those are the kind of areas I've really focused on for MedInfo.
Emma?
I mean, you can obviously look at the number of coaching conversations that you, the team, are having, but I think it's the value that it comes back to, and absolutely retention is one way to measure this. But I would also look for feedback in how teams feel that they, or your staff have felt that they have kind of actually improved themselves as well.
Okay, good. So we're on a good way. I'm going to summarize briefly and then ask everybody to do one last take-home message, all right? So what we heard is coaching is an absolute great investment and huge necessity in medical affairs, and not just in MSL, with a lot of transferable skills, not just within medical affairs, but also between departments, right? Coaching works best when it's one-to-one, but also you need to do something to link those moments, something in between, maybe like 60 seconds, right? It needs to be a regular and ongoing commitment. That commitment can be reflected in your objectives, in your budget, but it needs to be somewhere, and you need to measure it because it will invest some time. But all of that doesn't mean you shouldn't start after we hang up today, because as Emma said, there's no excuse for waiting. With that, I'm going to go to Michelle first, Emma second, and Marcus to give us their last parting words of wisdom. Michelle.
Yeah, I just think coaching as part of your work as a manager, it's absolutely critical. And quite frankly, I've just seen it's always made highly performing, highly satisfied teams. So for me, it's an absolute must do.
Thank you, Michelle. Emma.
Absolutely. The most important thing that you can do as a manager, as a leader, and it's the key to success, to get them to build towards your kind of ambition and where you want to go. So I think it's critical.
Wonderful. Thank you. Marcus.
Yeah, look, I think the most important aspect that underpins all of this is transparency. If you want to have a really effective coaching program, then everyone being on the same page, everyone feeling that they're on a journey together and they understand what that journey is, that they're not being managed in some kind of way, then that's going to create far more of a culture of coaching and openness and receptiveness. So that would be an important goal.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Great panel. I promised the audience, and you delivered more than that. Everybody's now armed and actually going and doing it. Dario, thank you very much, and back to you.